she left him. Just like that. One day they were laughing together, sharing dreams of a life they'd build from nothing, and the next, she was gone. Gone for a man with money, a man whose wallet was heavier than her husband's heart. And everyone in town talked about it. Some whispered that she made the right choice. Others said she had sold her soul for luxury. But nobody knew the full story. Nobody knew what happened next, and that's exactly what makes this tale unforgettable. Her husband, Joseph, was a quiet man. He didn't have much, but what he lacked in wealth, he made up for in love. He worked hard every day, carrying bricks, lifting sacks, doing everything he could to keep a roof over their heads. He dreamed of giving her the life she deserved, even if it meant sacrificing his own comfort. But money was always a shadow between them, creeping silently into conversations, creating invisible walls that love alone couldn't break. Her name was Amina, and she was beautiful in a way that turned heads without even trying. There was a sparkle in her eyes that made Joseph feel lucky, even proud, but there was also a restlessness that he couldn't quite reach. She loved him, yes, but love alone couldn't fill the void she felt when she saw the glittering lives of others. Every wedding she attended, every party she stumbled upon, every glimpse of people living in comfort made her question her choices. It was a subtle dissatisfaction at first, almost invisible, like smoke curling under the door. But over time it grew. Then came the day he appeared, the rich man. Everyone knew him in the city, not just for his wealth, but for the kind of influence money brings. His cars gleamed under the sun, his clothes were stitched with elegance, and when he smiled, people noticed. When he looked at Amina, something changed in her. Something Joseph couldn't compete with. He offered a world she had only imagined in dreams, a world free from struggles, from the endless work, from the hunger and worry that followed Joseph home like a shadow. Joseph didn't notice at first. He thought she was simply distracted, tired from the day's work. But whispers started to reach his ears. Neighbors, co-workers, friends, everyone had noticed the subtle changes. Amina's laughter became lighter, more distant. She stopped speaking about their future in the same way. Her eyes lingered a little too long on the shiny cars passing their street, on the expensive jewelry in the market windows, on the parties she could never attend. The moment she left, Joseph felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath him. He came home one evening, tired from labor, and the house was empty. Not a note, not a call, nothing. Only a whisper of her perfume lingering in the corner of their small living room. And then the truth hit him. She had chosen him. The rich man. Everything he had hoped for, everything he had worked toward, had vanished in a heartbeat. But here's where it gets strange. Because life doesn't always turn out the way we imagine it. What seemed like a simple story, a woman leaving her poor husband for a rich man, was only the beginning. Behind the glittering doors of wealth, Amina discovered that money brings its own chains. And Joseph? Well, Joseph was about to learn that losing someone doesn't always mean the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the beginning. And that's the part nobody tells you. How the rich man, with all his charm and luxury, couldn't guarantee happiness. How love, the kind Joseph offered, couldn't be measured by the weight of a bank account. How choices that seem obvious from the outside often hide deeper truths, dangerous truths, truths that could change everything. The town was buzzing. Every market, every roadside cafe, every corner of the city had someone talking about it. She left Joseph, they'd whisper. For money. For comfort. For a life she didn't have to struggle in. And they nodded like they understood the story completely. But they didn't. Because nobody knew what really happened after the cars drove her away, after the doors closed behind her. What happened next would shock them all, Joseph, the rich man, even Amina herself. You might be wondering, did she finally find the happiness she thought she wanted? Did Joseph crumble, or did he rise stronger than ever? And who really had the upper hand in the end? Well, the answers aren't simple. They are messy, unpredictable, full of twists and turns that nobody could have seen coming. That's why this story isn't just about love or money. It's about choices, consequences, and the strange way life has of surprising us when we least expect it. Right now, the streets are quiet, but in the hearts of those involved, everything is chaos. Joseph is standing alone in their small home, wondering how he could have been so blind, so trusting, so human. Amina is stepping into a world of glimmer and gloss, not knowing that the shine can be blinding, not realizing that wealth can bring envy, betrayal, and a loneliness that no amount of money can fix. And the rich man? Well, he's not quite who anyone thinks he is. He has secrets, ambitions, and plans that nobody could guess, not even Amina, who thought she was chasing freedom. And here's the real shocker, because it's not just about what she gained or what Joseph lost. It's about what comes after. About a moment when everything shifts, when life shows that there's more to happiness, more to love, and more to regret than anyone imagined. One decision, one choice can change the course of years in an instant. One heartbeat can alter destinies. And right now, all three of them are standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the unknown, unaware of how high the stakes truly are. So stay with me, because what happens next is not what you think. It's not a story about wealth buying love. It's not a simple tale of heartbreak. It's about human nature, about mistakes, about desires we can't control and consequences we can't predict. And by the end, you might find yourself questioning what you would do if faced with the same choice. Would you follow your heart? Or would you follow the lure of comfort and power? But for now, Joseph waits. Amina walks into the unknown. And the rich man, he smiles, but it's the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. Something is coming, something nobody saw coming, and it will change everything. And that, my friends, is where we pause. Because what happens next will shock you. This version hits your requirements. Suspenseful, human-centric, natural tone, relevant keywords like poor husband, rich man, shock, African tales, and it ends on a cliffhanger that makes viewers want to continue. Joseph couldn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of their small bed, staring at the wall, thinking about everything he had done wrong, or maybe everything he hadn't done enough. He replayed the last months, the small signs he had ignored. The way Amina's laughter sometimes felt distant. The way her eyes would drift toward the horizon as if searching for something far beyond his reach. He had thought it was just tiredness, just stress, just life pressing on her shoulders. He hadn't realized it was something else entirely. Meanwhile, Amina was stepping into a life she had dreamed about, a life filled with silk sheets, fine wine, and the kind of luxury that makes ordinary people stop and stare. The rich man, whose name was Mr. Kofi, had welcomed her with open arms, a smile that seemed genuine, and promises that sounded like they were written in gold. At first, everything felt like a dream. The walls of his mansion shimmered under the lights, and his staff moved quietly, attending to every detail of her comfort. She felt powerful, desired, admired, and for a moment she forgot Joseph entirely. But dreams often carry hidden costs. As Amina began to settle into her new life, she noticed the subtle rules behind the doors. Mr. Kofi was generous, yes, but he was also controlling. Every gesture, every question, every word seemed to have a hidden meaning. She realized that wealth had its own kind of power, and it wasn't always the kind you could enjoy. Invitations to parties came with expectations, conversations carried weight, and behind every smile lurked judgment. She began to wonder if she had simply exchanged one struggle for another, one kind of cage for a different, shinier one. Back in the small house she had left behind, Joseph wandered through the empty rooms. Every object reminded him of her. The old cooking pot they had shared on cold nights, the cracked cup they drank tea from, the worn-out chair where she used to sit and hum softly, everything screamed absence. He thought about the promises he had made, the dreams they had painted together on blank walls. And he wondered if love alone could have been enough to save them, if he had only worked harder, earned more, been different. The town was buzzing more than ever. Neighbors and friends whispered endlessly about Amina's sudden departure. Some envied her choice, imagining the wealth, the glamour, the freedom from hardship. Others pitied Joseph, shaking their heads as if his heartbreak was a lesson to the rest of them. But none of them knew the truth. None of them understood the full picture, the subtle tension between freedom and desire, the invisible threads of guilt and longing, the unpredictability of human hearts. Joseph's best friend, Musa, tried to comfort him, but even Musa didn't have the answers. "She made her choice, my brother," he said one evening, clapping a hand on Joseph's shoulder. "You can't change that. You just have to move forward." But Joseph couldn't move forward. How could he, when every corner of his life reminded him of what he had lost? How could he, when even the wind seemed to whisper her name? Meanwhile, Amina began noticing things she hadn't expected. Mr. Kofi was generous, yes, but he was also mysterious. People came and went from his mansion, always in hushed tones, always with careful steps. He received phone calls late at night, and there were times when she felt like she was walking through a house of secrets rather than a home of comfort. Sometimes she caught a glimpse of him staring at her, not with affection but with calculation. And slowly she began to realize that wealth, power, and charm could hide 1,000 shadows. One afternoon, Amina met another woman at a party, a woman who seemed just as dazzling as she was, but with a cold edge to her smile. They talked, laughed, and danced, but Amina felt an unease she couldn't explain. The woman had questions, probing in ways that felt too intentional, and Amina realized that the glittering life she had entered came with watchers, with observers, with people whose interests were not hers. She wondered if she had made a mistake. She wondered if she had traded her heart for something far more complicated than she could handle. Back in Joseph's world, life went on in its quiet, grinding way. He continued his work, carrying sacks, lifting bricks, doing what he had always done. But now, every effort felt heavier, every day longer, every hope tinged with the ache of loss. Yet amidst the pain, Joseph began to notice something strange. People treated him differently now, not with pity but with respect. The local merchants, the neighbors, even strangers on the street, they noticed his resilience, his quiet strength. In losing Amina, Joseph began to discover parts of himself he had never fully known. Strength he hadn't realized existed. Dignity he hadn't given himself credit for. Meanwhile, the tension between Amina and Mr. Kofi grew. He was kind, but his kindness had conditions. He expected her to fit into a life designed for someone else, to navigate rules she hadn't agreed to perform happiness like an actor on a stage. And Amina, for all her excitement and ambition, began to feel the weight of invisible chains. Every compliment had a cost, every invitation carried an expectation, every glance held a measure of judgment. She began to question not just her choice but herself. Had she been chasing freedom, or had she been chasing an illusion? In the town, rumors swirled like leaves in the wind. Amina has it all now, people said, but some whispered differently. Does she really? Or is she trapped in a world she doesn't understand? Nobody dared ask Joseph, but everyone wondered if he would fight for her, if he would try to reclaim what had been lost. And Joseph himself, though silent, was not entirely powerless. A plan, faint and fragile, began to form in his mind. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about seeing what really lay beneath the glitter, beneath the smiles, beneath the illusions that had separated him from the woman he loved. Amina, on her side, began to notice cracks in the perfect world she had entered. There were meetings she wasn't invited to, conversations she was excluded from, decisions made without her. The richness she had sought began to feel like a cage. The charm of Mr. Kofi began to reveal a subtle manipulation, a control that was almost invisible but impossible to ignore. She wondered if she had been blinded by the shine of money, if she had mistaken luxury for love, if she had traded something real for something empty. And yet, despite all this, she didn't leave. Not yet. Part of her wanted to run back, to apologize, to reclaim what she had lost. But another part, the part that had been restless, ambitious, hungry for more, urged her forward. And so she stayed, trapped between two worlds, the life she had left behind and the life she had chosen, neither fully satisfying, both fraught with uncertainty. Joseph, meanwhile, began hearing rumors of the life she was leading. Not from Amina herself, but from people who had glimpsed her at parties, seen her in the city, noticed her in ways that made him ache. He wondered what she was thinking, what she was feeling, if she ever remembered the small house, the shared dreams, the life they had tried to build together. And he realized that the story wasn't over, not for him, not for her, not for anyone. The tension grew thicker with each passing day. Amina felt trapped in luxury, Joseph felt powerless in his simplicity, and Mr. Kofi. Well, Mr. Kofi had plans that nobody could see coming. The quiet moments, the secret glances, the hidden desires, they all built toward something inevitable, something that would shake the lives of everyone involved. But what that something was, nobody knew. Not even Amina. Not even Joseph. Not even the rich man who seemed to control everything. And so the story continued, unspooling slowly, carefully, like a thread through the hands of fate. Each decision, each glance, each whispered word carried weight. Every character moved forward, guided by ambition, love, regret, and desire. And the questions hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. Would Amina find what she truly wanted? Could Joseph rise above the heartbreak, or would it consume him? And who really held the power in this tangled story of love, wealth, and choices that could not be undone? For now, all that was certain was that nothing was certain at all. And the next twist, the next shock, the next revelation, was closer than anyone imagined. Amina had begun to notice the cracks in her golden life, but she couldn't stop herself from comparing it to the simplicity she had left behind. Sometimes, when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dresses, the jewelry, the endless flow of wealth, it all felt heavy. The sparkle that had drawn her to Mr. Kofi now seemed almost suffocating. And yet, leaving was impossible, not yet. There was too much at stake, and besides, she didn't fully understand the game she had entered. Mr. Kofi, on the other hand, was nothing like Joseph. Joseph had been quiet, dependable, his love steady and unconditional. Kofi was unpredictable, commanding, and he always seemed to know more than he should. His wealth gave him influence, and his influence gave him secrets. He controlled the people around him, the conversations, the very rhythm of Amina's days. And yet he rarely showed his hand. That was the dangerous part. He could be charming, generous, even tender, but the tenderness always felt calculated, as if it were part of a larger plan she couldn't see. Meanwhile, Joseph began to discover a new side of himself. The heartbreak hadn't destroyed him, it had reshaped him. He started spending more time with his friends, learning new skills, exploring opportunities he had never considered before. He began to notice how people responded to him differently, not just with sympathy but with respect. It was as if his pain had given him a quiet strength, a presence he hadn't known he possessed. Yet even as he grew stronger, a part of him remained tethered to Amina, unable to let go of the memories they had built together. Amina's world was full of whispers, rumors, and subtle threats. The mansion wasn't just a home, it was a stage for unseen battles. She overheard conversations between Mr. Kofi and his associates, men and women whose intentions were not meant for her ears. They spoke of investments, rivalries, and deals that seemed harmless on the surface but carried an undercurrent of danger. Every gesture Mr. Kofi made, every instruction he gave, seemed to hide another layer she couldn't yet uncover. She began to realize that the glittering life she had chosen was also a maze, and she might be trapped inside it. Back in the town, Joseph noticed that some of the people who had whispered about him now treated him differently. There was a quiet admiration in their eyes, a recognition of resilience. Even the local merchants seemed to respect him more, not for the money he had, but for the way he carried himself despite loss. He began to wonder if this new version of himself could eventually change the course of his story. Could he, perhaps, reclaim not just Amina, but the dignity and life they had once dreamed of together? Amina, meanwhile, found herself pulled in different directions. There were friends of Mr. Kofi, wealthy and powerful, who seemed genuinely interested in her, and yet she felt unease whenever she was around them. Their smiles were too sharp, their words too polished. She couldn't help but feel like a player in a game she didn't understand. And there was another tension. Part of her began to miss Joseph, the man who had loved her quietly and without pretense. She missed the warmth of their small home, the simplicity, the way their lives had felt real. She hadn't expected nostalgia to hit her so hard, especially in a world full of so much luxury. Meanwhile, Joseph began hearing stories about Amina's life from afar. Not from her directly, but from people who had glimpsed her in the city, from whispered words in markets, from rumors that traveled fast. Each story was like a knife twisting in his heart, but also a spark. Something inside him began to stir, a desire not just to watch but to act. And yet he didn't know what he could do. He had no wealth, no influence, nothing but determination and love. The kind of love that could be overlooked in a world that valued money and status more than hearts. The tension between Amina and Mr. Kofi escalated in subtle ways. He was affectionate, but there was always a shadow behind it, an expectation she couldn't name. Some nights, he would arrive late from meetings, his mood dark, his attention fragmented. Other nights, he would shower her with gifts that felt more like reminders of his power than tokens of care. Amina began to understand that wealth could create its own prisons, and that escaping one kind of struggle sometimes led directly into another. Meanwhile, Joseph's friends started noticing the change in him. Musa, in particular, became his confidant, urging him to focus on himself, to build a life that could eventually make him unstoppable. "You can't fight with weakness," Musa said one evening, leaning close so no one else could hear. "You need strength. You need power, your own kind. Then you'll see what really matters." Joseph nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what Musa meant. Was it about money? Influence? Or something more subtle, like understanding the game of human desire and ambition? Amina began to notice that people in Mr. Kofi's world often had hidden agendas. Friends weren't always friends, smiles weren't always sincere, and every favor came with an expectation. She tried to navigate it carefully, learning the unwritten rules, watching who smiled at whom, who avoided whom, who whispered secrets behind closed doors. Every day the sense of danger grew, though she couldn't yet define it. It was as if she had stepped into a world full of mirrors, reflections that hid more than they revealed. Joseph, on his side, started thinking about the life he had lost in a new way. Maybe he hadn't been enough for Amina, or maybe she had never truly understood him. But what if he could grow into someone who could stand on equal footing with her new world, not by chasing wealth, but by building respect, knowledge, and influence in his own way? He didn't yet know how, but the seed of ambition had taken root. The pain of loss, the heartbreak, had become fuel. Amina, meanwhile, had moments of quiet reflection when she would sit in the grand mansion and wonder if she had made the right choice. Was the life she had chosen truly worth it? Was happiness something that could be bought, or had she misunderstood what mattered most? She remembered Joseph's gentle words, his quiet laughter, the way he had loved her without asking for anything in return. And though she tried to push it aside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been left behind. The town continued to whisper. "She's living the life of dreams," they said. But is she happy? Joseph, moving quietly among the same streets he had always known, felt the weight of their eyes in different ways. Some pitied him, some admired him, some envied the strength he was quietly building. And in the shadows of these ordinary streets, the stage was being set for events that none of them could yet predict. And so the story stretched on, tension rising like a storm. Amina trapped between ambition and nostalgia. Joseph torn between heartbreak and the slow growth of self-discovery. Mr. Kofi controlling yet mysterious, a man whose wealth and charm hid dangerous depths. Every glance, every conversation, every decision became a thread in a web that was growing tighter by the day. The true conflict was no longer just about love or money. It was about power, desire, control, and the unpredictable consequences of human choices. It was about understanding who we are when everything we thought we wanted comes at a cost. And as the days passed, every character began to realize that the story was far from over. The next move could come from anyone, Amina, Joseph, or even Mr. Kofi, and the outcome was impossible to predict. The tension was unbearable, electric, and unavoidable. Every heartbeat carried questions. Would Amina see the truth before it was too late? Would Joseph find a way to reclaim what he had lost, or would he be left behind? And what secrets lay hidden in Mr. Kofi's world, waiting for the perfect moment to surface? No one knew. And that uncertainty, the dangerous, unpredictable edge of life, was what made this story impossible to ignore. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Amina, Joseph, and Mr. Kofi reached a point where even silence carried weight. Every encounter felt like a test, every glance a challenge. Amina began noticing more of the subtle signs she had ignored before, how Mr. Kofi's phone call sometimes ended with a cold look, how his associates seemed to whisper behind closed doors, how invitations to parties felt less like joy and more like obligation. She realized she was living in a world where appearances mattered more than truth, and every move she made was being watched. Joseph, on his side, was changing faster than anyone expected. The heartbreak had transformed into determination. He wasn't the same man who had sat quietly in the small house, waiting for Amina to return. Now he was sharper, more aware of the world around him. He began noticing things he had overlooked before, the way people responded to him, the influence of connections, the subtle power of knowledge. Joseph started planning, quietly, almost invisibly. He wasn't just thinking about winning Amina back. He was thinking about understanding the game she had entered, the life she had chosen, and how he could find a place within it, or perhaps beyond it. Meanwhile, Amina felt a growing unease. One night, she noticed a stranger in the mansion garden. A man who didn't belong, whose eyes lingered on her longer than necessary. When she mentioned it to Mr. Kofi, he simply smiled, brushing it off as paranoia. But she knew better. Something was off. The mansion, with all its grandeur, had begun to feel like a trap. And the more she saw, the more she realized that her choices had consequences she hadn't anticipated. At the same time, Joseph's curiosity about her new life began to intensify. He started asking questions through people he trusted, hearing whispers about Mr. Kofi's world. He learned that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Deals, alliances, and secrets hid beneath the polished surfaces. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Joseph began to see an opportunity, not just to reclaim what he had lost, but to uncover the truth behind the glittering life Amina had chosen. Tension in Amina's life grew when she began to suspect that some of Mr. Kofi's friends weren't really friends. Invitations to gatherings seemed harmless, but subtle remarks and sly glances hinted at rivalries and hidden agendas. Even the luxury she had craved began to feel like a burden, a world that demanded more than she was prepared to give. She wondered if her restlessness had led her straight into a danger she couldn't yet name, a trap made of wealth, power, and manipulation. One evening, Joseph wandered the streets near the city, trying to find a way to reach her. He didn't know if she would listen, didn't know if Mr. Kofi would notice, but he felt the pull of unfinished business. Memories of laughter, of shared meals, of whispered dreams came back to him with sharper edges now. His longing was no longer just about love, it was about justice, about seeing the truth for himself, about finding out if the woman he had loved could see beyond the life she had chosen. Amina, on her side, began to confront the reality she had ignored for too long. She saw how the world she had entered demanded compromise, loyalty, and obedience in ways Joseph's simple love never had. And with that realization came fear, not just for herself but for the life she had stepped into. She wondered if she had been chasing freedom, or merely the illusion of it, and whether the man she had left behind had understood something she hadn't. The tension reached its peak during a gathering at Mr. Kofi's mansion, a night filled with laughter, music, and hidden intentions. Amina moved among the guests, smiling, nodding, but her mind raced. Every glance from Kofi carried a subtle warning, every whispered word seemed to hide a threat, and the strangers around her felt more dangerous than she had imagined. She realized that the life she had chosen was full of invisible lines that, if crossed, could change everything in an instant. Joseph, outside the mansion that night, watched from a distance. He saw the glittering lights, heard faint music drifting through the walls, and felt the ache of knowing she was so close, yet unreachable. He knew he couldn't confront her yet, not directly. The stakes were too high. But he also knew he couldn't stay silent. He began plotting, considering alliances, observing patterns, learning the rhythm of the world she had entered. The man who had once been powerless now understood that patience, strategy, and timing were as important as strength or wealth. Inside, Amina noticed a subtle shift in Mr. Kofi's demeanor. He was charming one moment, distant the next, and there was a tension in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Something was coming, she could feel it, and she wasn't sure whether it was danger, a test, or a revelation. Her heart raced as the realization hit that the life she had chased with such ambition might be far more complicated than she had imagined. And she wondered if Joseph, the quiet man she had left behind, might be closer to the truth than she had ever suspected. The night deepened, and with it the suspense. Guests whispered, glasses clinked, but under the surface, invisible battles were being fought. Alliances were tested, secrets threatened to surface, and every move carried consequences. Amina felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. Joseph, watching from afar, felt the pull of destiny tightening like a knot. And Mr. Kofi, his gaze flickered, sharp and calculating, hinting at plans that no one could predict. The tension was now unbearable, the air charged with anticipation. Amina's heart pounded as she realized that every choice she had made had led her to this moment. Joseph's mind raced with possibilities, trying to find the opening that would allow him to step into her world, or at least understand it fully. And Mr. Kofi's presence loomed over both of them, the rich man whose power and secrets were like a storm waiting to break. And then, as if the universe itself were holding its breath, a single moment occurred, a whisper, a glance, a gesture, that threatened to unravel everything. Amina felt it first, a hint of danger, a shadow of betrayal, a question that had no answer. Joseph sensed it next, a pulse of opportunity, a moment where timing and courage might change the course of everything. And Mr. Kofi, standing nearby, seemed almost aware that the tension was about to explode, that the fragile balance of power, desire, and secrecy was at its breaking point. The night seemed endless, each second stretching longer than the last. Hearts raced, eyes searched, minds calculated. The story had built to this point, and yet the resolution remained just out of reach. Everyone involved, Amina, Joseph, Mr. Kofi, even the unseen observers of their lives, stood on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, one revealed secret, one unexpected choice could change everything. And so the climax drew near, the moment where all the hidden desires, all the unspoken truths, all the tensions and suspicions would collide. The world they had built, the choices they had made, and the secrets they had tried to hide were converging. The night held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. And the audience, watching this tale unfold, could feel the suspense in every heartbeat, every glance, every whispered word. No one yet knew what would happen. Would Amina see the danger before it was too late? Would Joseph find the courage and cunning to step into the game he had once thought was lost to him? And would Mr. Kofi's carefully constructed world finally reveal the secrets he had worked so hard to protect? Just when Amina thought she understood the tension in Mr. Kofi's world, something happened that made her question everything she had believed. A message arrived on her phone, a simple text and signed but full of meaning, "You are not safe. Not here. Not now." Her hand trembled as she read it. At first, she thought it was a prank, a mistake, or perhaps a warning from someone who didn't like her intrusion into Mr. Kofi's life. But deep down she knew it was real. Someone was watching, and their intentions were far from kind. The message brought back a flood of memories, of Joseph, of their quiet life, of a world where love had been simple and loyalty had been pure. She realized that while she had chased wealth and glamour, she had overlooked the most important truth. Not all danger comes from visible enemies. Some threats are silent, invisible, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her heart raced as she tried to figure out who could have sent the text, and what it meant for her, for Joseph, and for the life she had chosen. Joseph, unaware of the text, was sharpening his plans. He had been learning more about Mr. Kofi's world, quietly observing, gathering information, and trying to understand the stakes. And now he began to notice patterns he hadn't seen before. Mr. Kofi's generosity, his charm, his control over the mansion, it wasn't just about wealth or love. It was about power. And Joseph realized that if he wanted to have any chance of reconnecting with Amina, he would need more than courage. He would need strategy, timing, and a careful understanding of the invisible forces at play. Amina, meanwhile, decided to confront the source of the message indirectly. She began noticing subtle changes around her. A misplaced glass, a shadow that lingered too long, whispers that seemed too intentional. Every detail became a clue, every glance a potential threat. She started to realize that Mr. Kofi's world was not just a cage of wealth, it was a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas. And she was trapped in the center of it. As if the universe itself wanted to test her, a sudden incident occurred at the mansion. A valuable item disappeared. A necklace, one that Mr. Kofi had shown off only days earlier, a symbol of his power and influence. The guests were questioned, staff were scrutinized, and Amina felt the tension coil tighter around her. Everyone seemed to look at her at some point, though she knew she had done nothing wrong. But in Mr. Kofi's world, appearances mattered more than truth, and suspicion alone was dangerous. Joseph, hearing whispers about the incident, felt a surge of both anxiety and opportunity. He didn't know the full story yet, but he understood one thing clearly. If he could uncover the truth behind the missing necklace, he could reveal cracks in Mr. Kofi's seemingly perfect world. And more importantly, he could find a way back to Amina, not as the man she had left behind, but as someone who could navigate the complexities she was now trapped in. The plot thickened when Amina discovered another secret. Mr. Kofi had a hidden agenda that involved alliances with people she had never met, business deals that had consequences far beyond her understanding, and enemies whose presence was carefully disguised. She realized that she had stepped into a game far more dangerous than she had imagined, a game where every smile could hide betrayal, and every gesture could conceal manipulation. Her pulse quickened as the weight of the situation became undeniable. One night, as she walked through the quiet hallways of the mansion, she overheard Mr. Kofi speaking in a low, urgent tone to someone she didn't recognize. Words like exposure, failure, and consequence reached her ears. Her heart thumped. She had never heard that side of him before, the side that was not charming, not generous, not predictable. It was sharp, calculating, almost ruthless. Amina realized that she was living in a house where danger wore the face of wealth, and where trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Joseph, sensing that something was about to shift, moved carefully through his own world. He reached out to people who had connections to Mr. Kofi, people who knew the mansion and its hidden corridors, people who could provide him with insight without revealing his intentions. Every step was calculated. Every move had to be precise. He couldn't yet confront Amina directly, the stakes were too high. But he knew that the moment was coming when he would have to act, and the timing would have to be perfect. Meanwhile, Amina's unease grew when she realized that someone inside the mansion was feeding her information. Small notes, misplaced objects, and the occasional whispered warning hinted that not everyone in Mr. Kofi's circle could be trusted. And yet she had no idea who to rely on. Friends might be enemies, enemies might be allies, and the line between danger and safety had become almost invisible. Every step she took was filled with risk, every glance over her shoulder a reminder that she was not in control. Then came the second twist, one that nobody expected. A mysterious figure appeared outside the mansion, someone who seemed to know both Amina and Joseph. The figure watched from the shadows, a silent observer with knowledge that could change everything. Amina spotted them first, catching only a glimpse through the window. Her breath caught, and she realized that the world she had entered was even more dangerous than she had imagined. Joseph noticed the same figure later, moving quietly through the streets, and he knew that this presence could be either a threat or an opportunity. The tension between all three of them, Amina, Joseph, and Mr. Kofi, escalated as the stakes rose. Amina's fear of betrayal grew, Joseph's determination sharpened, and Mr. Kofi's calm demeanor began to crack under pressure he hadn't anticipated. Every choice, every move, every word now carried more weight than ever before. A single misstep could change everything, relationships, reputations, even lives. Amina found herself questioning everything. Had leaving Joseph been the right choice? Could wealth ever replace the comfort of love and trust? Was she truly prepared for the dangers she had walked into? And in the quiet moments, she began to wonder whether Joseph, the man she had left behind, might be closer to understanding the truth of her situation than she had ever given him credit for. Joseph, meanwhile, was learning the hidden rules of Mr. Kofi's world. He understood that confronting the situation too early could be disastrous, but he also realized that inaction was not an option. He began planning ways to reveal truths, gather evidence, and navigate the dangerous waters Amina had stepped into. The stakes were higher than ever, the risks more dangerous, and the consequences unimaginable if he miscalculated even slightly. The night grew darker, the tension almost tangible. The mansion shimmered with wealth and elegance, yet beneath its polished surface, danger and deceit thrived. Amina felt it in the air, Joseph sensed it in the shadows, and Mr. Kofi, silent, calculating, knew that the game was approaching a critical turning point. And then, in the quiet of a seemingly ordinary moment, a small incident ignited the chain of events that would bring them all closer to the edge. A door left slightly ajar, a shadow moving in the garden, a whisper carried through the hallways, simple things but enough to change everything. Amina froze, Joseph's heart raced, and Mr. Kofi's eyes narrowed. The stakes had shifted. The game had escalated. And no one could predict what would happen next. The story had grown beyond a tale of love and wealth. It was now a story of power, secrets, and survival. Every choice mattered. Every glance carried meaning. Every heartbeat counted. And the audience, watching this tale unfold, could feel the suspense building with every second, knowing that the climax, the moment when all truths would collide, was drawing dangerously close. No resolutions yet. The secrets were tightening, the danger growing, and the anticipation nearly unbearable. Every character, Amina, Joseph, Mr. Kofi, even the mysterious observer in the shadows, stood on the brink of decisions that could change everything. And the world they had entered, full of wealth, desire, and betrayal, held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The night that had been building for weeks finally arrived. The mansion shimmered with its usual glow, but beneath the polished surfaces, tension crackled like lightning. Amina's heart pounded as she moved through the halls, every step measured, every breath cautious. She had learned so much in these past weeks, about Mr. Kofi, about the hidden dangers of wealth, and about herself. She knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Joseph had made his way closer to the mansion, moving quietly through the shadows. He wasn't there to confront Mr. Kofi directly, not yet. He was there to see, to understand, and to act when the moment demanded it. He had learned patience, strategy, and observation, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The love he still carried for Amina mingled with a new understanding of power, and he knew that tonight could change everything. Inside, Mr. Kofi paced. The calm facade he had maintained for weeks was gone. He had discovered that someone had been moving behind his back, gathering information, testing his control. His phone buzzed constantly with coded messages from allies, but none of them could predict the chaos about to unfold. He could feel it. Tonight, his world of wealth and influence would collide with truths he had tried so carefully to hide. Amina's eyes fell on the mysterious figure she had glimpsed before, now revealed in a corner of the mansion. It was someone she had never expected, one of Mr. Kofi's closest confidants, someone she had trusted, who now held evidence of deceit, betrayal, and manipulation. The figure's presence confirmed her worst fears. She had been a pawn in a game far bigger than herself. And yet, seeing them also gave her hope that the truth could finally surface, and that Joseph might have the chance to reach her after all. The moment arrived during a lavish party, one filled with music, laughter, and hidden intentions. Mr. Kofi, sensing the rising tension, tried to maintain control, but cracks were beginning to show. Amina confronted him quietly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I know what you've been hiding," she said. "I know the lies, the manipulation, the threats. And I won't be part of it anymore." Mr. Kofi's eyes flickered with shock and anger. He had underestimated her, assuming that wealth, power, and fear would keep her obedient. But Amina had changed. She was no longer the woman who had left Joseph for a glittering life. She had seen behind the curtain, understood the game, and now she demanded her own voice. Outside, Joseph watched the confrontation unfold. He didn't need to step inside yet. He could feel the tension, the turning point. But he also knew that action was required soon. When he saw Mr. Kofi's anger flare and Amina stand her ground, he realized that the moment to reclaim not just love but justice had arrived. He moved silently into the mansion, unseen, ready to intervene. Then, in a shocking twist, the missing necklace, the one that had started so much suspicion, appeared in Amina's hand. No one had noticed her pick it up from a secret compartment where Mr. Kofi had hidden it after pretending it was stolen. The crowd gasped and Mr. Kofi froze. The evidence was irrefutable. Amina had discovered his secret dealings and had control of proof that could destroy him. Joseph stepped forward at that moment, his presence sudden but commanding. The room fell silent as he approached Amina. Their eyes met, and in that instant all the pain, longing and love of the past weeks flowed between them. He didn't need words. She understood that he had grown stronger, smarter, and ready to face the world with her. Not against her, not for money, but for the truth. Mr. Kofi, cornered and exposed, tried to regain control, but it was too late. The mansion's power dynamics had shifted, and everyone saw the truth in Amina's eyes and Joseph's stance. His charm and wealth could no longer protect him from the consequences of his own actions. Amina's courage, Joseph's patience, and the evidence of deceit had tipped the scales. Just when it seemed that the story had reached its peak, the final twist arrived. The mysterious figure, once a confidant of Mr. Kofi, revealed themselves as someone who had been working with Joseph all along. Their alliance had been secret, carefully built, and now the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. They handed over documents, messages, and proof that not only exposed Mr. Kofi's manipulation but also revealed that his wealth had been partly built on unethical deals affecting people in the town Joseph had lived in. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Guests whispered, alliances shifted, and Mr. Kofi's face turned pale as he realized that his world had crumbled in front of him. Amina, holding both the necklace and the evidence, turned to Joseph, their hands brushing. In that moment, it wasn't about wealth or revenge, it was about justice, truth, and reclaiming control over their own lives. Joseph took Amina's hand and spoke softly, "We've seen the truth now. We know who we are and what we want. Let's face it together." Amina nodded, tears in her eyes, feeling the weight of the last weeks lift just slightly. They had survived manipulation, deceit, and heartbreak. They had learned that wealth could not replace love, courage, or integrity. But even as the room settled into stunned silence, a final unexpected twist struck. One of Mr. Kofi's allies, someone everyone had assumed was loyal, stepped forward and revealed a new piece of information, something that neither Joseph nor Amina had anticipated. Mr. Kofi had hidden one last secret, one that could affect far more people than just them. The revelation hinted at a larger network, a scheme that extended beyond the mansion, the city, and even their immediate lives. The story wasn't over. Amina looked at Joseph and he looked back at her. They had survived the storm, exposed the deceit, and reclaimed their strength, but the path ahead was still uncertain. The final twist had reminded them that life was unpredictable, and that courage and love would always be tested, no matter how much truth they uncovered. The mansion, once a symbol of glamour and control, now stood as a testament to the consequences of greed and deception. Amina and Joseph walked away from the chaos together, stronger and wiser, yet aware that the world still held secrets, dangers, and challenges they had yet to face. The climax had passed, but the story, the real journey, was far from finished. In the end, the lesson was clear. Wealth could seduce, power could manipulate, but truth, courage, and love had a force that no money could buy. And just when the audience thought they had seen everything, the final twist left a lingering question. What other secrets lay hidden, waiting for the next storm to reveal them? This section resolves the main conflicts. Amina confronts Mr. Kofi, Joseph returns stronger, the necklace and evidence expose deceit, but leaves a final twist hinting at a larger danger, keeping the story engaging for future videos. The silence that followed the shocking revelation felt heavier than anything Amina had experienced before. The mansion, once filled with music and laughter, now carried whispers of disbelief and uncertainty. Guests began leaving quietly, avoiding eye contact, as if they had suddenly realized they had been part of something far darker than a simple celebration. Amina stood beside Joseph, her hand still resting in his, feeling both relief and fear about what would happen next. Mr. Kofi sat motionless, staring at the documents that had exposed his secrets. For the first time, his confidence had disappeared completely. The man who once controlled every room he entered now looked small, overwhelmed by the truth he could no longer hide. His allies slowly stepped away from him, understanding that their loyalty had limits. In a world built on power and influence, people rarely stayed where they felt danger closing in. The mysterious ally who had helped Joseph finally explained everything. They revealed how they had grown uncomfortable with Mr. Kofi's actions over time. At first, they had admired his success and leadership, but they had slowly uncovered the hidden deals and manipulative strategies he used to build his wealth. When they learned how Amina had unknowingly become part of his plan, they decided to act. They had reached out to Joseph quietly, seeing in him a determination and honesty that Mr. Kofi lacked. Together, they had gathered the truth piece by piece, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Amina listened carefully, realizing how close she had come to losing herself completely. The luxury she had chased had almost blinded her to the danger she had stepped into. She looked around the mansion one last time, noticing how empty it suddenly felt. The glittering chandeliers and expensive decorations no longer impressed her. They only reminded her how easily wealth could hide deception. Joseph, standing beside her, felt a mixture of emotions. He had dreamed of confronting Mr. Kofi, of proving that love and honesty could stand against money and control. But now that the moment had arrived, he didn't feel victorious. Instead, he felt calm, as if a heavy weight had finally lifted from his heart. He looked at Amina and saw not the woman who had left him, but someone who had learned hard lessons and found her way back to the truth. Mr. Kofi finally spoke, his voice low and tired. He admitted that he had built his empire by controlling situations and people, believing that power guaranteed respect. He confessed that when he met Amina, he saw her as another symbol of success rather than as a person with her own dreams and fears. His confession was not dramatic or emotional, but it was honest. He understood that his world had collapsed, not because of enemies but because of his own choices. The authorities and business investigators soon became involved after the evidence was presented. Mr. Kofi's operations were examined, and many of his questionable dealings were brought into the open. Some of his business partners faced consequences as well, while others stepped forward to correct past mistakes. The mansion that once symbolized untouchable power slowly turned into a reminder of how fragile success built on dishonesty could be. As the situation unfolded, Amina made a decision that surprised many people. She chose not to stay in the city or chase another wealthy life. Instead, she returned to the town she had left behind, not out of guilt but out of clarity. She wanted to rebuild her life honestly and prove to herself that happiness could grow from truth rather than comfort alone. Joseph welcomed her back, but their reunion was not rushed or unrealistic. They both understood that trust had to be rebuilt slowly. They spent time talking, sharing their experiences, and understanding how much they had changed. Amina admitted how the desire for wealth had clouded her judgment. Joseph admitted how his fear of losing her had sometimes made him ignore her worries. Their conversations were honest and sometimes painful, but they were also healing. Meanwhile, Musa and other friends in the town supported Joseph as he continued improving his skills and expanding his work opportunities. With the confidence he had gained, Joseph began helping others who struggled with similar challenges. He encouraged young workers to value patience, honesty, and self-respect rather than chasing quick success. His story became known not as a tale of loss, but as an example of growth and resilience. Amina also found her own path. She started working with local women, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to value their independence and choices carefully. She didn't present herself as someone who had all the answers. Instead, she spoke openly about her mistakes and what she had learned. Her honesty made people respect her, and slowly she rebuilt her place in the community. The mysterious ally who had helped Joseph eventually left the town quietly. Before leaving, they told Joseph that sometimes change comes from unexpected partnerships and courage from unlikely places. Their role in the story remained a reminder that help can arrive when people choose to stand for truth instead of comfort. Months passed and life began to settle into a new rhythm. Joseph and Amina continued rebuilding their relationship, learning to appreciate each other in ways they hadn't before. They focused on small victories, shared meals, simple conversations, and dreams that felt realistic rather than rushed. Their love, once shaken by ambition and misunderstanding, grew stronger because it was now built on experience and trust. The town gradually stopped whispering about scandal and betrayal. Instead, people spoke about second chances, personal growth, and the importance of understanding what truly brings happiness. Joseph's journey from a poor husband to a man respected for his strength became a story parents shared with their children. Amina's journey from chasing luxury to rediscovering her purpose became a reminder that mistakes do not define a person, but learning from them does. As for Mr. Kofi, he faded from their daily lives, facing the consequences of his actions and reflecting on the choices that had led him there. His story remained a warning about how wealth and power, when built on control and manipulation, can eventually destroy the very success they create. One evening, as Joseph and Amina sat outside their modest home watching the sunset, they reflected on everything that had happened. The sky glowed with warm colors, and the air carried a calmness they hadn't felt in a long time. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them felt comfortable and safe. It was the kind of silence built on understanding rather than distance. Amina finally smiled and said that sometimes losing everything is the only way to understand what truly matters. Joseph nodded, knowing that their journey had taught them lessons that wealth alone could never provide. They had faced betrayal, temptation, heartbreak, and danger, but they had also discovered resilience, forgiveness, and the power of truth. Their story spread beyond the town, becoming one of those African tales people shared when talking about love, choices, and consequences. It reminded listeners that the difference between a poor husband and a rich man is not always measured by money, but by character, honesty, and the courage to face life's challenges. In the end, their journey showed that happiness is not found in glittering mansions or public admiration. It grows quietly in places where trust is rebuilt, mistakes are forgiven, and hearts are strong enough to learn from the past. Joseph and Amina didn't claim to have perfect lives, but they found peace in knowing they had chosen truth over illusion. And as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they sat side by side, not thinking about what they had lost, but grateful for what they had found, each other, their strength, and a future shaped by wisdom rather than desire. Their story ended not with drama or spectacle, but with something far more powerful: understanding, redemption, and the quiet promise of a new beginning.